Hey everyone, my name is Tanvi and welcome to my resume session. So today I kind of wanted to take the time to help you guys in creating that eye-catching resume for your employer by providing you with some tips that you can utilize to be able to better write and sell your resume. So before I begin, I wanted to introduce myself. I am a recent graduate of the University of Texas at Dallas. I graduated in May with a bachelor's in information technology and systems. Before that, I was a test engineer intern at Blue Cross Blue Shield of Texas. And currently, I am waiting to start my full-time role at Citibank as an EIONT analyst. Before this, I have had some professional development experience working at the UTD Business Communication Center as a tutor, where I individually worked with students on cover letters, resumes, and in their job search. I learned a lot working with these people, and with the experience I've had looking at several different resumes, I wanted to share with you the things that could help you going forward in how to write a strong resume and the small tips that can essentially play a big role in how you sell that resume. So before we get into the tips themselves, let's talk about the most important question. Why is your resume so important? We've all heard a common saying that's been going around. Resumes don't define you. However, they do highlight you, and the stronger your resume, the stronger your shot at landing your dream job. Now, companies, especially large corporations, get millions of applications, so they must use a filtering system. Now, you can think of this filtering system as three different piles. Employers generally look at resumes for approximately 6 seconds. And in those 6 seconds, they decide what pile your resume is going to go in. Pile A is approved, which means they're the most likely to land an interview. Pile B is a pile where they're a little bit iffy, they might have seen a few mistakes, maybe not their first choice, but definitely not something they would disregard. Pile C is pretty much something equivalent to a trash, where they may not have liked your resume or you might not have met those qualifications. And the likelihood of them going back to that pile C to recruit from is almost zero. So today I want to help you in landing your resume in the pile A section. And that's what I'm about to introduce to you through these different tips that I'll provide you with to help you moving forward in writing that resume. So the first tip I want to talk about has to do with your length, format, and organization. Now, this is really important because it is one of the first things, if not the first thing, that employers look at. This overall look of your resume is going to be what impression they have of you. So you want to make this as clean and as simple as possible. So for the structure, you want to keep your resume to one page and only one page, especially if you are a fresh grad or if you're looking for internships. Exceptions can be made if you're a highly experienced professional in the corporate world or if you are pursuing a career in academia or research. In those cases, they might have different standards for resumes, but in general, the common standard is to keep it one page long. Another thing that is very valuable to recruiters is their time. And many people have this understanding where they want to put in as many words on their resume and fill up all the white space so they can highlight all of their skills and experiences. But that is not entirely true because recruiters definitely love to read a resume that saves them time and effort and makes it easy for them to read. which is why you want to try incorporating as much white space as you can appropriately. Another thing that's frequently talked about is the font. Now, anything less than 10.5 might be pushing it, and maybe that's where you consider trying to reduce the number of words on your resume. And anything more than 12 point might make it seem like you are simply trying to fill up space on that resume. So a good font is somewhere in between those two. Same thing for margins. Anything less than 0.5 is pushing it. So 0.5 to 0.6 inch is somewhere that is a safe zone, and in that way your resume is going to look clean, neat, and pretty simple to read. And so that is pretty much all for the structure breakdown. Now, in terms of format, you want to put your experiences in chronological order. That means that if you had an experience a year ago, you want to put that on top of an experience that you had 2 or 3 years ago. Also, organize with priority. If you're a new grad, you want to put your education all the way at the top. If you are very technical, you might want to consider putting your skills at the very top, and so on and so forth. A lot of times, recruiters cannot get past your entire resume unless they have an idea of your educational background. So that's another thing you want to consider when you're organizing your resume. A very important thing is to avoid distractions. And this could mean using bright colors, unnecessary borders, different font styles, font sizes, all sorts of things like that. You want to avoid. You might think that adding different things on your resume is going to help it pop out, but in reality, it just makes it much harder for your recruiter to read and ends up having them spend more time on things that you might not want them to focus on. The key thing about format in your entire resume is consistency. This could be anything. This could be your font sizes, the colors you choose, anything like that. Even your dates. If you put hyphens in between some of your dates, you want to make sure you put them in all. If you put spaces before and after the hyphens, put them in all of them. And that way your resume is consistent and it's pretty simple at the same time. So I wanted to introduce to you an example of a technical resume. I've had a lot of questions about where to put these skills, what to highlight when you come from a certain technical background. And this resume is actually retrieved from the University of Texas at Dallas. And it does a really good job of showing you the priority levels and a good way to organize all of that content into a concise way. As you can see, this person has their education on the top and their GPA. And they have a skills and certification section right underneath that. So when you think about it, you want to think about it logically. What do you want your employers to see? And what are some of the basic qualifications that they need to know that you know? And put it according to that. So I really like this template, and I would highly encourage you to use something along the lines of this if you want to kind of compile your skills into one different section and then go about writing your business experience. Now, tip number 2, content. This is the nitty-gritties of what you write and how you write it. This is very important because after recruiters look at your format and look of your resume, they look at what you wrote. Now, there's many things that you can talk about in your resume. Some of them are mandatory. Some of them might be optional, but might be something that you want to include just because it highlights something unique about you. You must include your contact information. And by contact information, I mean anything ranging from your email address, LinkedIn, GitHub, anything. And most importantly, make sure to use your current address. The number of times people use emails that are outdated, they hardly check, it is essentially an opportunity cost. So make sure whatever email you're using, your phone number, they are current and you definitely have access to them. Your education. You want to put your recent education. You want to include work experience. This could be internships or full-time jobs, any academic projects, any organizations or competitions that you were a part of. Definitely include those. If you placed a certain rank in something, put that on your resume. Also, if you've done any publications or any research, even if it's not a part of your education, definitely want to consider putting that in there. Finally, if you have any skills or certifications that you want them to know, also put that in there. Now let's talk about the content, more specifically your bullet points. When you're writing out your bullet points, you want to keep in mind the rule of quality over quantity. It is always better to have a few detailed and concise bullet points over several unclear and vague ones. Also, you want to avoid any sloppy errors on your resume. This could be typos, grammar mistakes, maybe things that happen because of compatibility issues. You want to avoid these things that you have complete control over. So if you can, go ahead and proofread whatever you've written before you submit it. At the University of Texas at Dallas, we have a very good bullet point building model, which we refer to as BAM. Now, this model is really helpful when you're writing out your bullet points because it takes you step by step into writing a strong point. Now, the first part, B, is beginning action word. You want to make this a unique past tense verb. A lot of people have asked, so if you're currently in an internship or if you're currently working, why use something in the past tense? One way to answer that is you want to think of your first word of your bullet point to be a skill you acquired and not just what you did. When you use a past tense verb, you're telling your employer that you have successfully mastered that skill. Therefore, always use a past tense verb. Another thing is you want to make sure you use different verbs as much as you can. And this is because employers sometimes search and filter through a keyword system. And they might search, let's say, 5 keywords. If you're using the same word again and again on your bullet points, your match will only be 1. Whereas if you have different words, you'll have a higher amount of match percentage, further catching your employer's eyes. The second part to that model is add. And this add is pretty much the bulk of your bullet point. So you want to make this as strong as you can. And the way you do that is by adding a result of your action, a purpose, why you did it, or how you did it. So what tools did you use? What technologies, what skills did you use? What did you achieve after doing that? Or why did you do something? And the last part is metrics. And metrics are nothing but numbers, percentages, dollars, amount of things, number of team members, all of that information that adds more evidence and strengthens your bullet point more. Now, it's completely optional to use metrics. Not every bullet point will have a metric. However, if you do choose to use one, you want to make sure you have a good idea of where you obtain that metric from. In case your interviewer does happen to ask you about it, you want to make sure that you have everything that you can to answer that question. So that's an overview of BAM, and I would highly suggest utilizing this when you're writing your resume. I've also included an example of a BAM bullet point down below, which you can definitely pause the screen and look at, and I've color-coded it so that you can see which part of the bullet point model is being utilized in the statement down below. Now, the last tip is keywords. Now, keywords are a very important thing on your resume. As I mentioned before, companies like to filter through searching for keywords that are aligned to their industry, specific to the position that you're trying to apply to. So you want to orient your resume to the position that you are interested in. So let's talk about the keywords. When you're using these words, make sure to use appropriate and common industry language. When you're using acronyms, avoid using any unknown ones. And by unknown, this could be something that was used commonly in your home country, but something that might translate into something different over here. And also avoid using acronyms that might have been internal to your company and maybe another person from an outside perspective won't know what it is. So try to make the job easy on your recruiter so that they don't have to decipher what you're trying to say, and they just know based on that common language what it really means and what you actually did. When you are using acronyms also, you can use common ones. In fact, you should. In America, BS is a common way of saying Bachelor's of Science, and similarly, MS for Master's and other things like that. So you want to be able to reduce the amount of words on your resume by using these common industry terms. And that's going to help you declutter your resume and create that white space that you might be trying to make. So definitely consider using that. In summary, avoid redundancy. If you're using the same word again and again, going back to the idea of a filter system that employers might use, if they search for 5 different words and you're using one word consistently on your resume, your chances of meeting a match on that for a higher percentage is extremely low. So the more variety of words you choose, the better it is for recruiters when they're looking through different matches to be able to catch your resume and your attention. So definitely do that. And not just that, but also the fact that using the same language again and again can, at the end of the day, just bore the recruiter. So to have a very popping, eye-catching resume, the more variety you choose in terms of your language and the more your vocabulary, the better it will be. That being said, big words are not always better. Sometimes using simple, short words that are still advanced enough is going to do you a lot more good than using very sophisticated big words that might just at the end of the day end up taking unnecessary room on your resume. So keep in mind when you're writing the recruiter's perspective and for the position that you want to pursue, and write your resume in terms of that. Focus on what you really want them to see and take away the focus from unnecessary distractions. I wanted to include this sample resume, again taken from UTD, and this shows a very good picture of the combination of white space, consistency, organization, and even the bullet points. So if you're interested in looking at strong bullet points with the whole BAM model incorporated, this would be a really good thing to look at. As you can see, this person's experience is right here, and they have the important things that are needed for the position they're in. So for example, company name, location, their position, also the years or dates that they've worked at, and having their bullet points organized with different words in each one. So as you can see, this is a very good example of a strong resume, and try to format your resume in terms of what you see over here, and you'll definitely have a more eye-catching one. So I have included a short session on some FAQs that I have gotten lately about the different questions people have in terms of their eligibility, in terms of certain things that should be on their resume or not. And so yeah, I tried to compile it into a few questions that I can hopefully answer for you guys. The first question is, do I need to include my GPA, and what about my major GPA? In short, yes, you should always include your GPA. A lot of times what happens is you take your GPA out and employers assume that you don't have a good enough GPA, and maybe that's the reason they might not move forward with your application. Also, as I mentioned before, employers have a hard time getting through some parts of the application process without having the basic qualifications such as a 3.0 GPA or whatever it is their qualifications is. Um, so yes, having a GPA is a good thing, especially if you have a high one. If you don't have a very high GPA, you may consider leaving it out. However, I do encourage you to look at the job posting and see if they have any minimum GPA requirements. Based on that, I would suggest you make an informative decision about that, but realize that there can be consequences for not having the GPA on there. Regardless, I know in the application process itself, they do ask for GPA aside from your resume, and they might get hands on your transcript. So, that being said, I would definitely go with the safer option where, yes, GPA is a good thing. Now, your major GPA, I know some people have a higher major GPA instead of their cumulative, and they would rather put that on there. I think there's nothing wrong with putting a major GPA on there. However, I think you're better off stating explicitly that that is your major GPA. And the reason I say that is if they get hands on your transcript and let's say your GPA cumulative is something different from your GPA that's on your resume, it might be a little bit of a problem. So be on the safer side, include your GPA, major GPA, but definitely consider putting that explicit word major ahead of it just so they don't get confused. And a lot of times some companies just don't care whether you're putting your major or not. So, yeah, in short, put your major GPA on there, but definitely put the word major in front of it to avoid any confusion. The second question is, do I need an objective statement? I get this question a lot, and in my experience working at the Business Communication Center, I have seen numerous resumes that have an objective statement on there. Do I think there's a need for it? No. And the reason I say that is because having an objective statement is a pretty outdated concept now. It comes from a long time ago when computers weren't really much of a thing, online applications weren't really popular, and so people would physically post job openings and also mail in their applications. And from that, it's hard to really tell what positions you're looking for and all of that stuff. So I would say right now, because we have LinkedIn, which is a very popular website, I think that would be the best place to put all the types of jobs and your interests and all of that stuff. And I think it's also easier to just put the LinkedIn URL on your resume so that if the recruiter does want to know more about what you're looking for, they can go ahead and look up on your LinkedIn profile. Another reason I say that is because your resume is, in essence, your objective statement. And when you apply to a job online, everything is pretty much there. So it's pretty self explanatory what job you're looking for and exactly what you've applied to. Can I include my coursework? Now, this question is really difficult to answer just because some people find it very helpful to them when they put certain courses on their resume that stand out. Um, in my opinion, I think that if your resume can do without your coursework, then you don't need to put it in there. And by that, I mean if you don't have, or if you do have a lot of work experiences and projects, um, all of that, then I think adding your coursework is just an opportunity cost for telling a recruiter all the stuff you did outside of your academic courses. Um, that being said, if you go to a university and you end up taking a different class at another institute like Harvard, for example, and you really want to show that to your recruiter, then I think it would be a good idea to put it on your resume just because it's hard for them to really find out in any other way. But other than that, all the information about your degree plan and your courses is available on your transcript, which they may or they may not look at. So, in short, I think the answer to that is yes, you can include it, but is it a wise idea? Maybe not, just because you can use that space for some other important points that you want to mention on your resume. How many bullet points are too many? I think that 3 to 4 points for each experience is ideal. And that being said, we did mention quality over quantity. So if you find yourself having 6 bullet points, then you can kind of see, based on the balance of your resume, maybe it's too many points, and see how their length is. And if they're too short, try to combine them. So I do think 3 to 4 is the amount you should be shooting for. And in those 3 to 4, maybe add some more details and try to join some of them together so that you're not just fluent, but also concise enough to not take up different spaces. The other thing I do want to point out about that is that employers don't look at your resume for as long as you think they do. And if they do, most likely they'll just skim through it. Maybe, just maybe, if they read through a bullet point, it'll just be the first two. So if you do choose to put 6, I would suggest putting the last ones as the least relevant and pushing the most important things at the very top of your bullet points. Just because whatever you want to say can quickly be reached out if they do read all of the statements. What if I do not have enough work experience? Now, that's completely okay to not have enough work experience, especially if you're a new grad or if you've changed your major, something along those lines. So that is perfectly fine. But remember, we spoke about the different things that you can talk about on your resume. That's not just limited to work experience. So let's say that you've went to your university and you completed a few courses. If you have projects in there, then you should definitely elaborate on them. So not having work experience is not at all a problem, as long as you have enough stuff on your resume to back up what you did in place of that job experience. So what if I'm an international student? I think the job application process for international students, it is completely different, or if not completely different, then at least a little bit different from what citizens or people who live here go through, because they require sponsorship, they require different applications that they need to fill out. And I would think that it would be a good idea to put in your eligibility statement somewhere on your resume, if you are STEM or non-STEM, how many months of sponsorship do you need, or like how many months you can work without sponsorship. All that information can only do you good, since it avoids the heartbreak and frustration at the very end if you go through the entire process of interviewing only to find out at the very end that they don't sponsor. So making it clear from the right beginning saves the time, not just for you, but also your recruiter. The last point I want to address is, I'm out of space, what should I do? Now, this is a problem everyone has, including me. And it's hard to avoid running on and on about talking about the different things that you do. So I think once you have an idea and once you have all your bullet points together, and let's say you're over a page, almost to 2 pages, go ahead and try to rate the different experiences. And looking at a certain job profile, you might be able to take out or add different experiences that are more relevant to that profile. So look into what really is relevant and appropriate for the job you're interested in. No one said that you have to have the same resume in all of your applications. The basic things will be the same, such as your education and your GPA, but there's going to be some things that you can take out depending on the positions you apply to. So definitely consider doing that. And of course, if you can, use acronyms, create more white space instead of cramming a bunch of text into one resume. And just realize again and again, quality over quantity. So for every sentence you go, for every word you go over a page, ask yourself, is this really worth going over a page? And also keep in mind that if you're on the second page, the likelihood of that employer reading your second page is almost zero. Now, the final piece of advice that I want to leave with you is just a few more points. The first is to update your resume frequently and add content whenever it's fresh in your mind. You'd be surprised how much you would forget doing something a week after you finished versus writing your resume when you're doing the job. So definitely keep that, and also make it a habit to update your resume immediately after something big happens. You graduate, update your resume. Your GPA changes, update it. And that way you won't forget, and you're also up to date so that whenever an opportunity does come to you, you can kind of immediately look at it briefly and send it in. So definitely consider doing that. It's a good practice, and that way it's going to save you a lot of time. Also, the whole resume process is not an overnight process. You want to learn how to write a good bullet point. And this whole process is very introspective, and you need to reflect on yourself. The way I would suggest you doing that is to make a list of skills that you acquired. And out of those skills, think about what you want your recruiter to know, and think about how you can wrap those skills into your bullet points. Sometimes just saying what you did is very boring, but telling them what you truly learned from it can make all the difference. So it is a process of looking and asking yourself questions, and you need to be patient. So be persistent and definitely practice, and you will get better at it. The final thing is to add perspectives. Sometimes giving your resume to someone else just so you can let them play the recruiter can really change your perspective about some things. Maybe you'll realize, is this bullet point really getting across what I meant to say? Do they understand what I was trying to say? Am I clear enough? Am I detailed, or am I really vague? So getting second eyes on your resume is going to do you wonders when you're submitting your final version. Edit, edit, edit. That is something that I cannot stress enough. Having your resume ready takes a lot of effort, and I really suggest you proofreading as much as you can to avoid any errors that could have been avoided just through another look at your resume. So yeah, resume is a process for sure, and I really hope that I was able to kind of inform you guys on some of the tips that have really helped me, and also if I have said anything that really worked for you, anything that may have really never come across your mind, or something you find interesting, also any suggestions for any other videos, please do leave them down in the comments below. I would love to hear them, and I wish you guys the best of luck in your job search. I hope you guys can all find all the jobs that you're looking for. I know it's a tough time out there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I will see you next time. Thank you.